Now we get to a really great conversation, and I must say that I'm always humbled by the folks that are gathered by Peace One Day for important topics like this today, which is anti-racism and Anti-Racism Live 2022. So glad to be back. We are now going to dig in to what I believe is one of the major actors and players and forces that can make a difference today. And we really saw that in the last year since we gathered in 2021, where businesses all around the world in your localities have done something they have never done before when it comes to, as we were just talking about, looking outside themselves, perhaps being a bit selfless. And so this gathering today is about business strategies for anti-racism. I'm going to bring in our panel, which have so much to share with us today. And I'll first start with Sanda Ojiambo, who's the executive director of the UN Global Compact. Sanda, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And next we have Roya Mahboob, who is an entrepreneur and co-founder and CEO of Digital Citizen Fund New Now. Roya, good evening to you. All right, and the unmute is the best. I do this all the time, Roya. Brogan Simpson, Global Communications Manager at the Heineken Company. Brogan,
Hi.
how are you?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me here. Super excited.
All right. Let's get cracking, as they say. Let's get right into it. And Sanda, give us an overview of where we are right now. Where are we right now when we talk about how businesses can lean in on closing that gap of misunderstanding and also that creates, because of those misunderstandings, the racism and the prejudice that we see in just about every corner of the globe?
Thanks. Look, that's a big question. I participated in the same panel last year, and sadly, where we were last year is very different from where we are this year. I tuned in when you had your earlier interview with the other colleague and spoke about how much you've documented in the US context and how far back historically this goes. And so sadly, I think, we're still there. We're still debating, race. We're still debating racism. We are looking at racism evolve in many ways, shapes, and forms. And it pops up in very many instances. I think it's one of those things that we really have to look at and address and acknowledge that it really is a systemic issue, and businesses may take one response to it, but there's certainly community, a lot of racism that recurs within communities, and how do we address that, and really the multiple areas where racism and discrimination exists. But let me just speak into business and what that looks like. I think really importantly, it's to recognize that racism exists because there's inequalities in power, and I think that racism continues to be reinforced by economic and social and cultural and class differences between individuals and groups, and continues to be rooted in systems and systemic responses. Now, I think what is important, and perhaps a framework to look at it through business, is actually looking at racism as a fundamental human rights issue. And in that way, I think it really grounds it in principles that are truly universal for everybody and to everybody. I think that's really important. And also just to call out racism for what it is, because it's truly a form of discrimination. I think what's really important from the UN Global Compact perspective is, again, like I said, grounding it in universal declarations. There's a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it talks about the fact that everybody is entitled to universal rights and freedoms, and we cannot take any one of those away from everybody. So everybody should enjoy these fundamental rights. They call on, respect, promotion of rights, and just making sure that businesses are not complicit in abusing those rights. And I think that's really important. Now, once we've grounded that, I think as a principle, it's really important for businesses to then see how they bring this to life. I know that at the moment there's a lot of growing calls for regulation around human rights due diligence, and I think that's really important, particularly in the European context. But I really do think that businesses need to, not look at this as a regulatory issue. I mean, it's a human rights issue. It's a basic fundamental issue. It's about you and I. We're humans, and we surely should be able to take a more human and like realistic approach to what we want to do. lots of companies are taking voluntary action. I have to say, within the US, obviously, George Floyd and the many others that sadly came before did spark and ignite a lot of awareness and a lot of action around addressing racism in companies. But also, let me just acknowledge, racism is not only a black-white thing. We've also in the US had hate against Asian communities. Certainly right now in the Ukraine, we see different types of racism apparently coming up between those who are displaced. So there's also ethnic minorities in many parts of the world where racism occurs. So I think what I'd really say is that, from a business perspective, also understanding that there's significant actually economic and social losses by not being an inclusive and diverse economy. Why would you play football with only half a team? There's great players from all races. Bring them on board. Companies enjoy being in more diverse working environments, and truly the opportunity, I think, to be a profitable company and share that wealth and profitability with a broad work base only adds really well to your workplace brand. So I'll stop there for now, but really just to say, I don't know that we've progressed. If anything, we're seeing more layers and more nuances to what racism looks like.
And Sanda, I think in the 1 year, what we've also seen is at least we're learning the language in business about how to talk about it. You and I will get deeper into that, because part of the journey is, what are the words, right? What are the words? And then where are the goalposts? All right, now you got to move, right? It's fine to sit there and talk and jibber jabber and try to figure it out, but you got to move towards the goalpost. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Brogan, one of the interesting things, since I am talking about language, in what Heineken has done in moving itself to be a learning organization, because you're not born just as a person nor as a company being able to understand this stuff. It's not easy. It's very complex. It is regional, as Sanda was talking about, based on where you sit. How has Heineken talked about diversity, inclusion, and the racism that we are seeing in various places on Earth?
Yeah, I think for a company like Heineken, which has a global footprint and representation worldwide, one of the big undertakings that the business has taken is around education. So education of the matter and the topic at hand. And one of the big pieces of work that's been rolled out, and something I wanted to talk about, is about biases and becoming more aware of the biases that we have within our organization, but also within ourselves. Because one of the most important steps that we can take as employees is understanding our own privileges and understanding our own biases that might exist, maybe because of our upbringing or where we work, or the things that kind of surround us and build who we are. So that's been a really big focus, is just bringing up that standard of education for all employees so that we're all kind of on the same base.
Yeah.
Because I think how we really will start to ignite change.
And how did the conversation go internally? Because was it, hey, we don't know everything. We got to go towards what might be an education of our team, our leadership. Was it approached that way, Brogan, in terms of it's half full right now, and we have some amazing progress in front of us?
Yeah, I mean, I can say on a personal level, and maybe not so much representing the company, but my experience at the company would say, the company was put under a lot of pressure from its employees. And I think that's because, as Sanda was just saying, in terms of, especially after Black Lives Matter, there was a huge surge of interest from employees to understand more about, okay, where is the company at, and what is the company doing to become, anti-racist. So this pressure kind of also encouraged senior members of our team to become more transparent and to share kind of where we are, but also share where we want to get to and how we're going to get there.
Fantastic. Roya, at the Digital Citizen Fund, how has that affected your DNA as an entrepreneur, as a company creator? This is something that you have worked into your company's DNA.
Sure. I think that at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the American witnessed countless attack against of different, minority groups, from the attack against of Asian people to the murder of George Floyd and the protests that followed. It didn't look like the country was going in a better direction. Even according to the president of the American Psychological Association, we are living in, racism pandemic, which takes a heavy psychological toll on mostly on minorities and as well on African Americans. And with 2020 being so focused on rebuilding the economy and helping businesses, people are often wondering that what about the elephant in the room? After nationwide protests and major outcry from the public and the business owner and many citizens started feeling that they needed to do some things, and that's why it's happening all over the country, in the United States and other places. The businesses, big businesses, started to express their solidarity, and that was good. And also the many of the, it was a good point to start it, but still, in 2021, hate crimes still roses 44% in U.S. major cities, and still, while Black American people are the most targeted in every other cities, still also there is anti-Asian hate crimes growing the 342% from 20 to 21, which we are not doing better. But I think that in terms of the business community accountability for its progress toward the agenda of anti-racism, started with the leadership positions, and we needed more department and human resources to discuss this fundamental error in the society. And people should put, in a position to help and provided empathic resources to minorities, that they don't send them home for seeking justice when due to the racism that is happening in their workplace. The government also, I believe that they need to uphold the policies against of racism and involve every system and businesses that they needed to, taking the roots of the racism, and they have to making the policy and strategy that, as they say, that they do it.